Hey everybody, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program RP-0. We are starting off our Twitch recap episode out here at Jupiter. Yeah, probably, with our Callisto lander mission, which is making its first gravity assist flyby of Callisto itself in just a couple of hours/days. This craft has made a flyby of Io that reduced its apoapsis significantly, and we just lucked into this flyby. It's going to kind of offset our telemetry a little bit, but the undesired result of dropping our periapsis. So really the goal here was to maybe see if we can get another flyby on the opposite end of the orbit, probably in an orbit or two, just to see how things would work out. Maybe if it would kick our orbit back up a bit, but probably not going to happen. We're just going to continue to do braking passes around Io until we've lowered our apoapsis enough to start making acceleration passes around Callisto to naturalize out our orbit, and then see if we can't go for landing sometime in the next year, maybe two. It's going to take a lot of gravity assisting to kind of get this orbit leveled out and get us into a place where I feel pretty good about making that burn for orbital insertion. So right now we are setting up Flight Computer in case we happen upon a new and interesting biome, something we haven't seen at least from Space High or Space Low around Callisto. Using Flight Computer, of course, and then we'll just switch off the HUD and watch this approach come in at a little bit of time warp. Just, double checking. There it is. Anyway, here's old me for the flyby. All right, we popped out of time warp. Oh, just do our alarm to SOI change. We still have an hour until our actual SOI change. So I guess that's look at this very squiggly encounter we have here. That's fantastic. I love when I get squiggly gravity. Can't figure out null values. Excellent. All right, 52 minutes. Let's just if y'all are lying to me about 30 kilometers being safe, I'm going to be quite upset because we're running out of time for this contract. We're just moving way too fast to make an encounter right now. And honestly, we need to make our next pass on the other side of the orbit so that our tangentials can figure each other out, I suppose. Yeah, don't know if garbage collection or if radio in happening. Hey, look at this. We're getting some. Oh, that's biological sample. We'll reset you. Reset. In space high. So high over the Midlands, no doubt. Man. Insertion. We do not have the Delta V to pull it off. Actually, why don't we? Ooh, escusa. Why don't we check? We can go ahead and kill our first node. What would it take if we just slammed on the brakes and got into orbit? 6 kilometers per second is the answer. So how about a no? We have about half of that, so it's going to take a couple more flybys. Guess who just landed their first RP-1 orbital Kerbal? Was it you, Lucy? Yeah, congratulations. What year did you make it in? Fair bet you did far better than I. It's not a good time. You need to make part 2 of the Jupiter Slingshots 101. Apparently. It's too late for me, Gaz. I'm far too lost already. Oh, cratered Midlands. Can we get a radio in this biome? Probably not. We got another 55 minutes of falling to do. Around 60 science out of it. 1962, not bad. Yeah, way better than I did. Started in Callisto orbit for 435 meters per second. Well, you're also a lot smarter than me, Scorpio. Obviously, yeah, that was a retarget designation. I think our next radio in is actually going to be at our periapsis. Which time to periapsis? 3 minutes. Let's go ahead and get turned around. Who has told you to go anywhere, my friend? I love how this is a thing. I really do love how it just wakes up and says, I want to go this way. So this way, if it looks like we're gonna hit something, we can burn radial out and maybe save the spacecraft from dying a fiery death. So we'll just keep it angled here. We'll favor the bold and keep the magnetometer aimed at the ground, just in case we scrape it off. It really, really looks like we're going to hit stuff. And quick break here, just because that's a picture worth saving. I hope it's not the last picture we get from this mission. Still falling, current altitude true, 76, radio 79. So hopefully we won't hit any of these nifty little features. Is it cheating to spacewalk with Mercury? Let's get turned. I would say no. Okay. Well, we're coming in 41 kilometers. I think we're going to be fine. 47 seconds till our next radio in. Orbital period 1 minute, 17.35 seconds. That's some fascinating info. We speed landing or just orbiting? We are fly pasting. And we're just going to give it a little bump from our engines here. And try to benefit greatly from the Oberth effect. Okay. Does the engine make noise, everyone? I'm showing no. I got none bars on OBS. Well, that's disappointing. No engine sound / MP3. Yep, but we are not going to hit the ground either. And there's a radio in. Let's just go ahead and shut down. Biological sample in space near Calisto at the cratered Midlands. I don't think we have this biome. Yep, maybe we do. Space near. Yep, we do. Reset, 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 reset. Hey, there's something we can transmit. 90 science for atmospheric pressure scan. Oh, come on. Let's pull this out, make sure we don't lose stuff. Reset, atmo pressure, transmit. Bingo. Oh, that was a secondary radio in. All right, and we're on our way back up. What's our track looking like? Yeah, pretty good. Add a maneuver down here and see if we can't plot things out. No, because it's in a vacuum. Touche, Scorpio. Touche. All right, yeah, there's our next radio in. Probably null science on that one. Oh man, what happened to all the other ones I grouped up? I thought I grouped a lot towards the exit, but apparently not. Reset, 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 reset. Let me reboot flight computer just to make sure we didn't miss anything. Yeah, nope, that's all she wrote. That is in fact all we're going to get here, so we will jump back into a bit of sped up footage as we try to go ahead and set up at least maneuver nodes for our next set of encounters. I did kind of do a little bit of figuring things out as far as what does what and how much delta V we're looking at to adjust our orbit under what parameters. This is really just trying to plot out our next move and also get an estimation for how much delta V all of these things were going to take. We could, with a very significant expenditure of fuel, get ourselves another encounter at the opposite end of the orbit, as I intended initially, I guess, but it is a fairly significant cost and probably absolutely will not be worth it. So we're just going to kind of abandoned some of that. Right now, taking a look and seeing what the delta V expenditure would be to bring our periapsis up to Callisto's orbit altitude, and then just start making assists from there. If we were at that altitude, we'd probably only be 1 or 2 flybys before we could hit orbit, maybe even less. But unfortunately, getting there is going to be quite expensive. So I think the plan for now is going to be to use IO to drop our periapsis down to something a little bit more reasonable, and then we'll make probably 2 or 3 more flybys of IO before we start trying to just focus solely on Callisto. Really, it just means we need to get our apoapsis down to probably within 25% or so above Callisto's altitude, I guess is the appropriate term here. So for now, we're just going to stay the course, and you'll see how much our next flyby of IO will affect our orbit. It's not a bad plan, and it's pretty cheap. So next pass, or within a pass or two, we'll hit this maneuver node. I think that's 100 and some odd days away. 13 days away. My mistake. But we'll go ahead and set up our maneuver node for that and bid Callisto farewell, at least for the time being. We'll be seeing a lot more of this rocky little guy in the coming months, it seems, although our flyby of Io will not be for quite a bit longer. Anyway, we're going to jump now out to our Saturn Moon Surface Explorer. This is our Enceladus lander, which is currently in orbit around Saturn, and we're going to try to set up for our very first flyby of Enceladus, which is absolutely teeny tiny. This would be the very first gravity assist pass for this spacecraft since its orbital insertion, and the fact that we are pretty much on target, but oh man, the the amount of time spent in Enceladus SOI is teeny tiny, absolutely minuscule, and we are far enough away at Saturn currently to mean that we can't even really get a view, which is interesting enough. But we'll actually be in Enceladus SOI for mere minutes. And it's going to take many flybys to naturalize out this orbit enough before we can make a move for orbital insertion. And of course, these being the exact duplicate craft that we have sent to Jupiter, they have far less fuel to work with. So our reliance on gravity assist is going to be much higher, which is, I don't know, it just means that basically we need to be really patient throughout this entire endeavor if this mission is going to succeed. We do have 2 of them on station, so in case one fails or can't quite pull off a landing, we have a backup. It also means that if the Enceladus mission goes really well, we can probably start to target a different moon of Saturn in hopes that, you know, maybe we can get a twofer. Anyway, we'll correct out the rest of this on RCS. We do actually get an encounter, although it is very brief, currently an impactor, but because of our distance, any slight tap on the controls could ruin that. So we're just going to lock where we are. We'll set up a maneuver node and a Kerbal alarm clock to bring us back as we get closer to adjust that encounter and make it a little more worthwhile. Maybe we'll even get some science from it. Now back into the VAB, we're actually going to do a little bit of a build-a-sode, which is what these Twitch streams were originally supposed to be. So this module is currently at the top of the bits for Tremonia Station, which basically includes this hub module, the Lunar Uber 2, a resupply pod, and a very large fuel tank plus a tug. I would like to start recommissioning the station so that we can resume service to Rosalina Memorial Station on the lunar surface, or maybe even start picking up some additional currently unexplored biomes from the moon. So, the very first necessary step to bring out to what we have there is a life support tank, preferably a very large one. Now, because our space program is broke, kind of the nice way of putting it, we're really, really strapped for cash. Like, really, really strapped for cash. So I would like to do as much of the construction of this lunar orbit station out of the back of the SKS Heavy as humanly possible, I suppose, which means we do have some space requirements that we have to meet as far as how big a tank we can put on stuff, how large we can make it, etc. We do have some new docking ports um, unlocked, so we do have access to things that are a little bit better than the old Apollo ports that we have used for absolutely everything. So at least we'll have that going for us, that maybe we can make the station a little bit more rigid and a little less wobbly, and maybe things won't go smashing through the cargo bay as we make our orbital insertion around Earth. So this bay kind of gives us a rough approximation of how much size we have to work with SKS Heavy. Of course, there is actually another single node bay on top of this, but most of that space is taken up by a crew module and fuel cells and some other things. So this might be an appropriate size for our life support tank, but we do want to kind of include a docking hub, or at least an assembly hub on here, because we will have a few other things to add, namely crew habitat space, maybe some method of generating power, and like a docking hub so that we can dock things to it, and all while maintaining CLS compliance. Now, my initial idea for this was to just go with a 3-point um, kind of assembly structure here with just a 3-axis instead of a 4-axis kind of setup. That would give me a little more room to work with as far as the sides of each axis, so that we could make each of the individual attachment things, that whatever goes on each hub, a little larger. You'll notice we are now also using the common berthing mechanism docking ports for station assembly. Of course, craft going to Tremonia station and actually, the things that will bring a crew out there will still be using the Apollo docking port standard, because that's what really all of our craft have been built with. We have multiple craft in service currently using the Apollo docking port standard, and I think we're just going to stick with it rather than decommissioning a bunch of existing craft and trying to switch them out at great expense later. So I think I have this triport hub thing kind of figured out. So we'll get it into the sub-assemblies menu and then start plotting out how the rest of the rebuild is going to go. Although I really wish I had plotted out how the rest of the rebuild was going to go before I put this thing into the sub-assemblies menu. But, we'll go with it. So this was just kind of like a rough approximation of what my idea kind of was, at least what I had sketched out on some paper. Included 2 large habitat assemblies on 2 of these nodes, and then a power coupler, or some solar panel things out on the 3rd coupler, and then out of the nose we would form a docking assembly at some point. We'll tweak scale up these solar panels, get them kind of up to par, and then go ahead and start trying to plot out a docking something or other. Really, we only might need at 3 docking ports. I can foresee a situation where we would have an Artemis or a Chestnut out here, as well as a Nemo or a Dory, typically only 1, and the Lunar Uber 2, of course. But, it never really hurts to have more available docking ports. The problem with this is that at least one of these docking ports is going to be very difficult to use, as it is angled kind of straight at those solar panels array things. So there will be some other considerations made, but for the time being, we'll go ahead and get this hub assembly into the cargo bay of our SKS Heavy, and You should probably pick textures for stuff before we do this. Just makes things go a little bit smoother. What I did forget to do, however, was include a pressurized fuel tanks for the RCS. The engine, that's our experimental lander engine, does not require pressurized fuel tanks. However, the RCS does. So we do need to have some form of pressurized vessel there. We need comms so that we can communicate with this thing when it's all the way out at the moon. And of course, solar panels to maintain power. So we can kind of stretch this to fit a little bit of extra delta V. Why not? It's not going to hurt anybody at all. Of course, not that it really matters, but we'll get to any of this in just a little bit. We'll add some struts, keep it from wiggling in the bay, although we really shouldn't have much of an issue with that. It never hurts just to double check. Anyway, we'll rename that. We'll get it to the build list. I did come back a couple of days later and with a fresh idea on my sketchpad. I figured I'd at least come and try to plot it out and just to see if it worked, and I actually ended up liking it a lot more. So we're going to kind of start in the same way that we have done the docking ring for Harmonia and Ostrich Station, although it's not going to be a ring this time. I do have a little bit kind of a unique idea in mind for this station, and I wanted to keep it, somewhat unique at least. Try to make it as special as I could. So currently we have this nifty looking docking horseshoe thing. It does provide more than enough space, what we need for our crew habitation needs, and also gives us a free docking arm that we can use for actual docking. Puts our solar panels up in a much more easily accessible spot, and this gives me a chance also to address some of the things that I have forgotten as far as what all this station might need, and a cupola is definitely one of them, because all stations should have lots of windows, because what's the point in being in orbit like that if you can't look out and admire the view? We also need a spot to store our tools and various parts and accessories, even if they're clipped in a little bit. Of course, a separate docking hub on the bottom, and maybe some means of water purification. That would be nice, right? And why have one cupola when you can have two? And although we don't, strictly speaking, need a laboratory, I can't think of a good reason why not to have one. Especially, it does kind of balance out the design just a bit. And we'll move our toolkit assemblies, since it is passable through crew, to our outer docking hub. It does also give us the extra distance we need to mount that CBM module to the end of it. And now we're up to 3 cupolas. And then all that's left is the docking adapter. And since we're on the opposite end of the station from the solar panels and have no chance of actually impacting anything, we can really just go a little bit bigger and maybe make it a little more awkward by making them all cone shaped. But they all fit and they all have good clearance. And so I think this is probably a little bit more of the method that we're going to be going with. I'm actually going to expand on this idea a little bit more by just trying out different fit and finish for things. So of course we've got 2 docking adapters there that we don't need. We can move our purifiers to those sides instead, and use some of our newfound space to maybe expand our crew habitation capabilities a little bit, and we'll tilt them just to make it extra hard for anything to dock with it. And now, since we do have so many power consuming modules here, I think we're going to need an extension on our solar arrays. So that just means whatever brings this power coupler up is probably going to have to do some on-orbit assembly of all of this, because there's no way it's going to fit. Anyway, we'll add some comms and a few other things and start getting this packaged up and ready to ship. So that's going to do it for this episode, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging out. I really appreciate it. And I'll see all of you in the next one. So until then, see you later.